businesses, and they even challenged some established ways of doing things around campus. And it taught me the lesson that while a lot of the world often focuses on the big events and institutions, the bigger story is that most progress in our lives actually comes from individuals having more of a voice.
I'm here talking to you so that I can.
So since then, I've focused on building services that do two things: give people a voice,
throughout history,
and bring people together.
Grossly unethical.
And these two simple ideas of voice and inclusion
I think
go
that,
hand in hand.
Yes,
and we've
it
seen
was
this
the
throughout history, even if it
unethical
doesn't always seem that way
you were playing
today.
with an entire country.
More people being able to share their experiences,
the psychology of an entire country without their consent,
has always been necessary
and
to
not
build
only are you
a more inclusive
playing
society.
with the psychology of
and
an
it is our
nation.
commitment to
You're
each
playing
other
with the psychology of an
that we
entire
hold
nation
each
in
other's
the context of
right
the
to express ourselves
process.
and be heard above our own
My name is
desire to
Christopher
always get our
Wiley.
way
I'm
in
a
every
data
debate.
scientist, and I help
That's
set
how
up
we make
Cambridge
progress
Analytica.
together.
It's incorrect
This view is
to
increasingly
call
being
Cambridge
challenged.
Analytica a purely sort
Now,
of data science company.
some people believe that giving more people a voice is driving division rather than bringing people together.
Propaganda machine. If
More
you
people
can
across the
control
spectrum
all of the streams of
believe that
information
achieving the
around
political
your
outcomes
opponents,
that they think matter
you can influence how
is
they
more
perceive
important
that battle
than every
space,
person
and you can then
having a
influence
voice
how
and
they're
being
going to
heard.
behave and react.
And I think that that's dangerous. So today, I want to talk about why, and some of the important choices
Alexander
around free
Nix, where
expression that
do I begin? He is
throughout
not
history,
the
we've
easiest
seen how being able to use your voice, how people being able to use their voice helps people come together.
He cares
We've seen this in the civil
more,
rights movement.
I think, about
Frederick Douglass
winning
once called
than
free
what we
expression
actually did
the
at the
great
company.
moral renovator
He's
of our society.
An upper-class Etonian
He said,
who expects people
slavery
to
cannot
follow
tolerate
him wherever he
free
goes.
speech. Civil rights leaders argued time and again that their protests
When I
were
first met him,
a
I knew he
protected
was
form of
Steve
expression, and one noted that nearly all of the cases involving the civil
later
rights
I got
movement were
told
decided on
he
First Amendment grounds.
was the editor of Breitbart.
We've seen this globally too, where the ability to speak freely has been central to the fight for democracy worldwide.
Whatever. Steve
The
Bannon
most repressive societies have always restricted speech the most, and when people are finally able to speak, they often use their voice to
more
call
academic,
for change.
more academic.
In this
more
year
sort of
alone,
ideas-focused
people have used their voices to end multiple long-running dictatorships in Northern Africa, and we're already starting to hear
we set up
from people whose voices had been excluded
in Cambridge. And whenever Steve would come, we would bring a bunch of people from the London office, plop them into the Cambridge
office.
office.
Our idea of free expression has become much broader over even the last 100 years. Many Americans know about
that
the
we
Enlightenment
had a lot of
history
our
and how
operations
we
based
enshrined
out
the
of
First Amendment
the
into our
university.
Constitution.
We
But
changed
fewer know just how dramatically our cultural norms and legal protections
and
expanded,
it was
even
his
in recent
idea.
history.
Steve's idea
The first Supreme
to
Court
give the
case
company
to
the name
seriously consider
Cambridge
free speech in the
Analytica.
First Amendment
This sort of warped perception
was in
is infused into the
1919.
name Cambridge Analytica
Shank
itself.
versus the United
So you
States.
psyopsed Steve
back
Bannon,
then,
basically.
In a
the First
way,
Amendment
he was a target
only
audience of
applied
one.
to the federal government.
And you changed his
so states
perception
could
of
and
reality.
often
And we
did
changed his perception
restrict your
of
right to speak.
who we were and what we were doing.
Our ability
and,
to
and
call
what
out
the
things that we
situation
felt
he
were
was in.
wrong also used to
And
be a
then
lot
from
more
there, it
restricted.
was like you took that to
libel
then
laws
to
used to
America
impose
to change the
damages
perception of reality
if you
for
said something
America.
negative about someone, even if it was
And the reason why he was
true.
interested in this is because he follows this.
The standard
this
then
idea
shifted,
of-
so that way
of the
it was
Breitbart
okay as long as you
doctrine,
could
which is
prove that your critique was true.
If you want to change politics,
And we didn't get the
you first have
broad
to
free
change
speech
culture,
protections that
because
we have now until the
politics
1960s, when
flows
the Supreme Court
from
ruled in
culture.
opinions like New York
And
Times
so what I
versus
said is that
Sullivan,
if you want to
that you can
change
criticize
culture,
public figures as
you
long as you're
have
not
to
doing
first
so
understand what
with
the
actual
units of
malice,
culture are.
even if what you're
People
saying
are
is
the units
false.
of culture. If you want
So
to
we
change
now have significantly
politics,
broader
you
power
first have to change people
to
to change
call
the
out
culture.
things that we feel are unjust
Did
and
that
share
fit in
our
with,
own
you know,
personal experiences.
he had quite a
We
famous
see
expression
movements like
about
Black
politics
Lives
being
Matter
war.
and Me Too spread and
If
go
you
viral
want to
on
fight a
Facebook.
battle,
The
or you want to
hashtag
fight
Black
a
Lives
war,
Matter
you
was
want to
actually
win a
mentioned
war,
for the first
you need
time on
weapons
Facebook.
for that. You
And
wanted
this just wouldn't have been
cultural weapons,
possible
and we could
in the same
build
way
them for
before.
you. But obviously,
Just
he needed money to
100
do
years
it.
back,
So
many of
he
the
took
stories
it to
that people are sharing
Robert
now
Mercer.
would have been
Who's
against the
Robert
law to even
He
write
is
down.
an American billionaire.
And of
in
course,
New York.
without the internet, they certainly
And
wouldn't have
before
reached
he
so many
was-
people.
Before he got rich,
So with Facebook today, more than
through
2 billion
algorithms.
people now have a greater opportunity to express themselves and to help others.
Alexander Nix
Now, while it's easy to focus
is
on
with
the
me, and he
big
starts with
social
this sort of
movements
razzle dazzle.
I think it's important to remember that most progress happens in our individual lives. It's the Air Force moms who start a Facebook group so that their children and other service members who can't come home for the holidays have a place
Essentially, the pitch was that we were going to combine
comes together after the hurricane to provide
had
food
existed in politics
and to volunteer to help
in part
rebuild.
My background.
It's the small business on the corner
on board
that now has access to the same sophisticated tools that only the big guys used to have access to. So now they can get their voice out to reach customers, create more jobs in their town, and become a social hub in their community.
In order to scale that, we would then be
progress and social cohesion come from billions of stories like this happening
a psychological
all
profile
around the world.
Of each voter
People having the power to express themselves at scale is a new kind of force in the world.
All of the United States.
It is a fifth estate alongside the other power structures in our society. And people no longer have to rely on traditional gatekeepers in politics or media to make their voices heard.
He had a saber
and that has important consequences.
Savored the champagne.
And I understand the concerns that people have about how tech platforms have centralized power.
You get all this money,
but I actually believe that the much bigger story is how much these platforms have decentralized power by putting it directly into people's hands.
I needed to figure out a way of getting
amazing expansion of voice that we've experienced through law and culture and now technology as well.
So we've done all these cool pilots, but
so giving people a voice and broader inclusion go hand in hand. And the trend has certainly been towards us getting much greater voice over time. But there's also an important counter-trend,
was something that was
which is that in times of social tension,
way faster,
our impulse is often to pull back on free expression.
They had
because we want the progress that comes from free expression,
given
but we don't want
special
the tension.
Permission to harvest data,
Martin
not
Luther
from
King Jr.
just
wrote
the
his
person
famous
who used
letter
the
from a
app or
Birmingham
joined
jail where he was
but
unconstitutionally
also
jailed
it
for
would then
protesting
go
peacefully.
into their entire friend network
And we saw this
and pull
in the
out
effort
all
to
of
shut
the
down
friends'
campus
data
protests
as
during the
well.
Vietnam War.
So if one person
we saw this way back when America was
app,
deeply polarized
I
about
would
its
not just
role in
see
World War I.
your Facebook
And the
profile.
Supreme
I
Court
would
ruled
see
at the
all of
time
the
that
Facebook profiles
the socialist
of
leader
everybody that you're
Eugene
friends
Debs could be imprisoned
we
for
would
making
only
an
need
anti-war speech.
to touch
in the end,
a couple hundred
all of
thousand
these decisions
people
were wrong.
to expand into their entire
Pulling
social
back
network,
on
which
free
would then
expression
scale us
wasn't
to,
the answer.
most
And
of
in
America.
fact,
And people
it
have no
often
idea
ends up
that
hurting the
their data is
minority
being
views that
taken
we
this
seek
way.
to protect.
No, if you were a
Now,
friend
from where
of
we are
somebody
today,
who
it seems
used the
obvious
app,
that,
you
of
have no
course,
idea
protests
that I
for
just pulled
civil
all the
rights
data.
or
It
making a
was
speech
almost
against war should be
everything
allowed.
that
Yet this desire
would
to
be
suppress
on a
this
Facebook
expression was
profile.
felt deeply
So
by
that was
a lot of
things like
society at
status
the time.
updates, likes, in
And
some
today,
cases private messages.
we are in another
So
moment
Cambridge
of social
Analytica
tension.
has people's private
We
messages
face
they
real
send
issues
on Facebook.
that are going to take a long time
I
to
can't
work
say
through.
whether they did or not.
Massive
what I'm
economic
saying
transitions
is
from
what the app can do.
globalization
So
and technology.
you didn't ever stop and think,
Fallout
actually,
that remains
this
from the
is
2008
people's
financial
personal
crisis.
information,
Very
and we're
polarized
taking
reactions
it, and we're
to
using
social
it in ways
issues
that they don't
and greater
understand.
migration,
You didn't
not just
think,
here, but
actually,
across the EU and
I'm not
around
sure
the
about
world.
this.
And many of our issues flow downstream from these changes.
The company we
And
didn't.
in the face of these tensions, once again,
good
a
job at
popular
due
impulse is to pull
diligence.
back on
No,
free expression.
We didn't.
We're at
What
another
about you?
crossroads.
Not just the company, your involvement in that.
We can either continue to stand for free expression, understanding its messiness, but believing that the long journey towards greater progress requires confronting ideas that challenge us. Or we can decide that the cost is simply too great.
Collected in a
and I'm here today because I believe that we must continue to stand
told
for
the
free
parliamentary
expression.
inquiry on fake news.
Now, at the same time, I know that free
Cambridge
expression has
Analytica
never been
has
absolute.
Never used
There are some people who argue that internet platforms should allow all expression that is protected under the First Amendment, even though the First Amendment explicitly doesn't apply to companies.
Tens of millions of Facebook
I'm proud that our values at Facebook are inspired by the American tradition, which is more supportive of free expression than anywhere else in the world.
Became the foundation of Cambridge Analytica.
But even American tradition recognizes that some speech infringes on other people's rights.
Using Facebook data.
Yet still, a strict First Amendment standard might require us to allow things like terrorist propaganda or bullying people
and that I don't understand.
Almost everyone agrees that we should stop, and I certainly do.
What kinds of messaging
as well as content like pornography
susceptible
that
to,
would just
including
make a
the
lot of
framing
people
of it,
uncomfortable
the
using our
topics,
platforms.
the contents, the tone,
So once we're taking
whether it's
this
scary or
content
not,
down,
that kind of thing.
The question is,
what you would be susceptible to.
Where do you draw the line?
And where you're going to consume that.
So most people
and then how many times do we need to touch
you should be able to say things that people don't like, but you shouldn't be able to say things that put other people in real danger.
In addition to having, data scientists and
the shift over the last several years
strategists, they also
is
have an entire team
more people today would argue that
designers,
more speech is dangerous now
they then create
would
that
have just several years
that
back.
gets then sent to a targeting
So this raises this question of exactly what counts as dangerous speech online.
And websites will be created,
spend some time
blogs will be created, whatever it is that we think.
So many of the arguments about online speech are related to new properties of the internet itself.
On the internet.
If you believe that the internet is completely different from everything that comes before it, then it doesn't make much sense to focus a lot on historical precedent.
Until they start to think that
I believe that we need to be careful about such overly broad arguments
instead of standing in the public square,
pretty much every new technology, from the printing press to the radio to the television,
and have that shared experience as to what
instead, I think that we need to consider
you are whispering into the ear
of
each and every voter,
and how internet services like ours might address those risks
another thing to another
while still protecting a free expression.
Society.
So perhaps the clearest difference with the internet is that now a lot more people
we don't
have
have
a voice
any more shared understanding.
in almost half of the world's population.
We don't have any more shared understanding.
And that is dramatically empowering for all the reasons that I've mentioned. But inevitably, some people are going to use their voice to try to organize violence, to try to undermine elections, to hurt others.
Probably
and we have a responsibility to address these risks.
For sure whether
because when you're serving billions of people, even if a very small percent of them cause harm,
getting Trump
that can still be a lot of harm.
Growing the alt-right.
So we need to address that.
If you want to fundamentally change society,
and we build specific systems to address each type of harmful content. From incitement of violence to child exploitation to other kinds of harm like intellectual property violations. It's about 20 categories in total. And we judge ourselves by the prevalence of harmful content on our services and by the percent of that content that we find proactively before anyone has to report it to us. So for example, our AI systems identify 99% of the terrorist content that we take down before anyone even sees it.
I don't want to say I don't trust anyone.
So to do this, that is a massive investment.
Do you know what I would say? I would
we
say
now have more than 35,000 people working on security, and our security budget today is greater than the whole revenue of our company was when we had our IPO earlier this decade. Now, all this work, though, is about enforcing our existing policies, not necessarily broadening our definition of what we consider dangerous. And I think that if we do this well, we will be able to stop a lot of harm while also fighting back against putting additional restrictions on speech. A second important difference with the internet is how quickly ideas can now spread online. Most people can now get much more reach than they ever could before, and this is at the heart of a lot of the positive uses of the internet. It's empowering that anyone can now start a fundraiser, share an idea, build a business, or start a movement that can grow quickly.